everyone, and welcome to the 19th episode of Viral Banter. I am coming to you from my second last day of hotel quarantine, and soon I will be out in the much freer world of New South Wales, so I'm very excited. But today on the show, we are joined by three amazing guests, as always, all part of the Generation Liberty team. Let's start with a familiar face, our campus coordinator at Australia's National University in Canberra. Please welcome Connor.
Thank you very much for having me. Great to be here.
Great to have you on the show again, Connor. And now a new face to the show. She is the campus coordinator at the University of Adelaide. Please welcome Georgia to the show.
Hi, Renee. Thank you so much for having me.
Now, Georgia, can you please just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you're studying, and why you were keen to get involved in Generation Liberty?
Definitely. So I'm from rural South Australia originally. I grew up on a sheep farm around 2 or 3 hours north of Adelaide. I'm currently at the University of Adelaide doing a double degree in law and media. And I'm super excited to be part of Generation Liberty, just to sort of even out the debate on campus, particularly at a time where it feels like the left-wing ideology is so dominant. Yeah.
Great to hear that, Georgia. And now another new face on the show today. He is our new coordinator at the University of Newcastle. Please welcome Callum to the show.
Hi, Renee. Thanks for having me on. Very happy to be here.
Now, Callum, I'm going to do the same thing to you. You are the new kid, so can you please tell the class a little bit about yourself, what you're studying, and why you're excited to be part of Generation Liberty?
Well, just like Georgia, I'm from originally from rural New South Wales, and I went to school in Sydney, and then I went to come to university up here in Newcastle. And much like Georgia, I'm here to promote an alternate view to that of the socialists that seem to absolutely smother every poor student that attends university these days.
Yep, Generation Liberty does have a fight on our hands, but I do have an awesome team behind me, so I am very, very optimistic. Now, let's start off with our first topic, which is something that's being discussed everywhere right now, which are the Supreme Court nominations in the United States. Connor, can you please just give us an outline on the current state of this story?
Yeah, definitely. So the Supreme Court is the United States' highest court, and 9 judges sit on that bench. And I guess, unlike Australia, the US Supreme Court is highly politicized. And so you have conservative judges and you have liberal judges. And so on September 18, one of those Supreme Court judges, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, passed away. And she was well known for being quite left-leaning. And this is significant because before Ginsburg passed away, the court comprised of 5 notionally conservative judges and 4 notionally liberal judges. And so Ginsburg's death has meant that there is now an open seat to be filled. And constitutionally, Donald Trump has the ability to nominate someone to fill that seat. And at a rally in North Carolina, Trump asserted that he fully intends on filling that before the election in 2 months. And Trump almost surely has the numbers in the Senate to do that. And indeed, after what they put Kavanaugh through, he has no reason to not do it, and he owes the left nothing. And if he does fill it, ultimately that means there now be 6 conservatives and 3 liberals. So I even say fill that seat.
Yeah, so Connor, I will follow that up. Do you think Trump is making the right move, pushing through this nomination before the election, or should he, bow to the demands of the Democrats, saying that he should look into his heart and make the right decision and not do this before the election?
Look, there's no reason as to why Donald Trump shouldn't do this before the election. I always find it quite laughable when the Democrats say something along these lines of you should look into your heart and wait until after the election. The Democrats, if they are in this position, would 100% do the exact same thing. Not only that, Donald Trump is still president, and the president constitutionally has the right to nominate someone to fill that seat. So the Democrats asking Donald Trump to wait is in essence asking Donald Trump not to do his constitutional duty as president.
Yeah, I really agree with you now there, Connor. Georgia, what do you make of some of the threats that are being made by members of the Democratic Party that they are not ruling out impeachment to stop this Supreme Court nomination?
Well, look, for me, there are a couple of parts to this. So as Connor has just discussed, Trump does have that constitutional right to be able to nominate somebody. Pelosi came out this week and sort of said that they want to protect the American Constitution by considering impeachment as a method of preventing this. But if she was really looking to like the Constitution's best interests, she'd be stepping aside and sort of saying, you go for it. Like it's in the Constitution that he can do it. And then regardless of that, doing a bit of reading on this morning, and trying to impeach Trump wouldn't really hold up the Senate process much at all. We saw that earlier this year when that process was happening. So I don't think that there's a lot of sense in those kind of threats, to be honest.
Yeah, and it's also just really worrying seeing this being used more and more, this threat of impeachment as a kind of political tool to delay processes or try and get what you want. Callum, as we know, the last Supreme Court confirmation hearing was quite vicious. Do you think that the upcoming one will be the same level of intensity, considering that Kamala Harris is actually going to be on the Judiciary Committee?
Well, the last one wasn't just vicious, it was also almost insufferable at how repetitive the Democrats were throughout the entire thing. I'm not too sure. Kamala Harris, I was rewatching the Kavanaugh confirmation hearings and whatnot rather recently, and Kamala Harris was she was very vicious, like you say. But I think now that she's the vice presidential candidate, there's a certain amount of respectability that she'd be trying to show right now. Not so much, probably not so much of the sharp tooth attack dog approach. And I also think that particularly Joe Biden, the Democrats know that so close to an election, the last thing that they want to be doing is playing political games like trying to pull impeachment and trying to stop a nomination like that without really good cause.
I can only hope that you're right there, Callum. Connor, we have already seen a little bit of vitriol actually coming out against the front runner for this pick, which is Judge Amy Barrett. The anti-Catholic rhetoric that is being voiced by parts of the Democratic Party and the media is really a sight to behold. There are parts of the media that are comparing her prayer, saying that her prayer group inspired The Handmaid's Tale, which is patently false, and multiple publications had to publish corrections after that. Do you think this would happen if it was, say, a left-wing Catholic woman coming up for nomination? And secondly, do you think that it is a smart move by the Democrats to be so openly hostile to the Christian faith so close to an election?
Look, I just want to say that I'd be personally overjoyed if Amy Barrett filled the seat. I think she's evidently qualified and she'd be fantastic on the Supreme Court. And the fact that the tolerant left are attacking her like this in such a fashion, I think is actually revealing of their true character and their true intentions. They wouldn't do this if the candidate was from the left. And if the right behaved in this sort of way to a left-wing female candidate, they'd be shouting screams of sexism from every corner. Now, as to whether or not the Democrats are smart for doing this, it's evidently not smart. One of the reasons that Christians vote for Trump is because they've shown time and time again that Democrats disdain Christians. It's the same thing that happened here in Australia. Labor forgot about Christians, and in many seats where there are religious people, Labor saw strong swings against them. If anything, the Democrats attacking Barrett show Christians more of what they already know and will embolden them to go out and vote for Trump. As the US press secretary said, the US is one vote away from their religious liberties being stripped by the Supreme Court and one vote away from their free speech being stripped away too. So Christians want Trump to fill the seat, and Christians are going to be emboldened to vote for him even more now that the Democrats are using this rhetoric against Barrett.
Yeah, I think I really agree with you there, Connor. But moving on to our next topic, and something that's really concerning happening back in Australia, and that is the omnibus bill coming up for a vote in the upper house in Victoria. This bill will extend the already outrageous unchecked powers of the Victorian state over the Victorian people. in most democracies in the world, the power to arrest is confined to the police and those with specialist police training. But the Daniel Andrews government plans to give these powers to anyone that they select, so any member of the public service or someone selected by the secretary of certain departments. And there will also be no limit to these numbers. So these authorized officers will be able to detain indefinitely. There's no limit on how long they can detain you. Anyone who they reasonably believe is a threat or may become a threat to public health. So that is correct. If this bill passes, you may be locked up because a bureaucrat believes you might break quarantine or encourage us and others to do so. So you not necessarily had done anything, except they believe that you might do something. Georgia, what are your thoughts on this bill?
Yeah, look, I won't lie, I'm pretty worried about this. I think obviously the situation in Victoria for a little while wasn't great. Like the second wave came through, we were seeing high case numbers, we were seeing a large number of deaths, unfortunately. Action did have to be taken, but it just feels like Premier Andrews just kind of keeps going a bit further. He's kind of almost pushing his luck this time. Also confused as to why he thinks that now is the time to be introducing this bill. Obviously, the last few weeks we've thankfully been seeing the kind of decreased case numbers and the decreased number of deaths in Victoria. And kind of when other states got to this point and were in this situation, they started easing their restrictions. And it feels like this is kind of the biggest, amp up of Victoria's restrictions we've seen so far, just about. So it doesn't really seem like it's necessary at this point. And then also there's obviously the argument, like you were saying, these authorised officers don't even have to kind of see you do anything wrong. They only have to sort of think that you might, which is really, really concerning for our democracy. It's sort of something that you'd see more of a dictatorship, to be honest. And it's going to be really important going forward that Premier Andrews starts respecting democracy and the freedoms of his people again, because it's not something we've seen for a little while.
Yeah, I really agree there. It is a really, really worrying precedent to set, even at the state level. And I think it's a worrying precedent to set for our country overall. Connor, the Victorian Bar Association has come out and expressed their concerns about this bill in a letter saying it could breach the state's human rights charter and it allows citizens to be placed under arbitrary detention. What do you think are the legal ramifications of a bill like this?
So amongst other concerns, Wendy Harris, who's the president of the Victorian Bar Association, wrote to the Victorian Attorney General outlining that the proposed bill would, in essence, hand unprecedented power to the health department. And this unprecedented power forms due to the broad nature in which people can be afforded these powers. And it means that untrained and unprofessional people will be at the helm of essentially undefined power. And I don't think it's unfair to say that a little bit of power in someone's hands can go to their head and has the potential to wreak havoc on human rights. Now, in terms of the Victorian Human Rights Charter that they have, these detention laws certainly go against provisions in that charter which seek to prevent arbitrary detention. And one of the recommendations that the Victorian Bar Association had for the legislation sought to curtail that, because as the bill stands, it does go against that human rights charter. One of the reasons, one of the legal ramifications or one of the legal concerns, I think, is that unlike the Commonwealth Constitution, which has, I guess, enshrined forms of judicial review, states have enormous plenary power, and there's not really that type of safeguard in Victoria. One of the good things, though, I guess, even though the bill has passed the lower house, it still needs to pass the Senate. And there are 3 independents that they'll need to swing, though, given some of them are Greens, I'm not sure how that will go. But
yeah, we can only hope that people in the upper house, find their conscience and realise that this is a massive overstretch by Daniel Andrews. But Callum, Daniel Andrews has come out defending his bill and stated that reasonable checks and balances will be in place to make sure that this new power is not abused. Considering what we've seen in Victoria over the past few months, do you think that the Victorian people should trust Andrews when he says this?
Well, look, I'll be the last one to defend Daniel Andrews, but he he would have to be a very stupid leader to not have reasonable checks and balances in place, because with all the dictator Dan memes going around, you'd have to have no sense not to make sure that that this is absolutely watertight legislation. But quite frankly, the situation in Victoria is the biggest mess I've ever seen. Over 750 cases at one point, and that's a situation the Victorian people should never have been put in. We saw yesterday that the Prime Minister wrote to the Premier Andrews saying take our Defence Force personnel to keep things in balance, but he decided to send it off to a unionised private company, and everything, frankly, blew up and became a mess. So, just like the first time, where it was a case that it was just a situation that Victorians should never have been put in due to the incompetence of Daniel Andrews and his ministers, this is yet another situation that Victorians should not be put in. The lockdowns have done their job. Cases are below 50. There is no need for further powers, such an overreach like this, to be brought in. We're not at 700 cases a day. We're at less than 50. So I don't know what to say more than that Daniel Andrews is probably very, very misguided at bringing this kind of legislation in, and he will earn no reprieve from voters if this policy is another dud like the last 10.
Very true there, Callum. And I can only hope that those checks and balances are in place for the people of Victoria. Well, it is certainly very concerning what's happening in Victoria right now. And I do have to say, even though I had to go through 14 days in a room to escape Victoria, I'm very glad that I'm in New South Wales right now. But moving on to a lighter topic, as you all are relatively new to the Generation Liberty team, I'm going to ask you all a question I ask all new members of the team, which is, what is the craziest thing you have ever heard in a university tutorial or lecture or out on campus? Past examples have been lecturers comparing people who work in the mining industry to fascists, a tutor saying that universities are overrun by far-right politics, and even more silliness. Examples from student politics are also welcome, and also high school examples are also welcome. And we are seeing even high schools and even primary schools are becoming more and more heavily politicized these days. So we'll start with you, Connor. What is the craziest thing you have heard at university?
Well, this isn't my story, but a story of one of my best mates. He was in a bioethics tutorial, and they were discussing whether or not in the future we should clone extinct animals. And they gave the example of a mammoth, and they gave a variety of reasons to why they should start doing this. One of them being that cloning mammoths would increase interest in science and paleontology. But one of the arguments they really pummeled for it was that cloning mammoths would help stop climate change because they trample on trees and shrubs and basically stop greenhouse gases explaining faster. And so in essence, what was taken away from that tutorial was that Jurassic Park really is a greeny movie, and we should encourage it to happen in order to stop climate change.
That is so bizarre. Don't trees absorb carbon dioxide? So wouldn't trampling trees be bad for climate change? That just really hurts my brain. That's a really, really interesting one there. Georgia, what is the weirdest or craziest thing you've heard at university?
Look, to be totally honest, not one thing jumps out for me, but it's probably, I think, because I've become so accustomed to it over the years, it's just constant for me. I've had papers I've written marked down just because my tutor doesn't agree. I've been called a fascist when I've said that I've worked for the Institute of Public Affairs. And it just feels like there's this constant criticism of anything that's not that super, super far left-wing ideology. And for me, it did start in primary school, like you were saying. You start to feel a bit worried and ashamed about what people are going to think when you're kind of explaining what your own political beliefs are. And obviously that's something that Generation Liberty is doing a great job in trying to change, which is great.
Yeah, unfortunately, you're not the first person. Actually, it did happen to me at the University of Sydney. Someone referring to the IPA as fascist. It was really odd because he brought in an article by the IPA about how Pokemon Go had got more people exercising than any government program. And he's like, I don't normally show articles by the IPA because they're a fascist organization, but this one isn't too bad. And I'm like, could you please define fascism for me? And he's, what? I'm like, but the IPA is for the deregulation and a smaller government. I don't think that fascists want a smaller government. He's like, oh, that's just what they say. They really have a fascist agenda. It was the weirdest moment in a class for me. Now, Callum, I'll ask you as well. What is the craziest thing that you've heard at university?
Well, I'll have to echo Georgia again and say that there's not one that instantly stands out, but one that does come to mind wasn't just something they said, but something they did. I was in an election review meeting after a student politics. They were coming up with the guidelines for the next one, and they, rather than following not just the state and national standard, but just generally the Western standard of optional preferential voting, they decided to go the US style of simple majority first past the post voting, quote unquote, because international students wouldn't know how to vote. And they said it without saying it that we've got basically Chinese students who have never voted. And that came from the left, a very left-filled meeting who apparently had no respect for our national standard.
That is so weird. And also, that's borderline racist to say that international students couldn't understand a voting ballot. It reminds me of in the US when anyone pushes for showing voter ID to be able to vote, which you don't have to do in most states, and people saying that this would somehow be against minorities to show an ID because somehow people of different ethnic backgrounds can't source an ID card, which seems so inherently patronizing to me. So very, very strange. But thank you for all of those news stories. Friends, I do generally tend to collect them and have a few in the bag for whenever I get asked for examples of how crazy the left has gone on universities these days. But so today, the IPA office is actually having a Zoom trivia competition. And trivia is actually something that people in our office take very, very seriously. So I thought I might do a short trivia game here. And then the IPA team can start sifting out some new young talent for our future trivia teams. Theodora, one of our campus coordinators, has already proved herself a serious competitor. She has never been on a trivia team that has lost so far. So that's a pretty impressive record. So I've asked you all to bring a pen and a pad, and these are all going to be multiple choice questions. So I'll get you to write, A, B, C, or D on that pad and hold it up all at the same time so we can make sure that nobody's copying answers. So is everyone ready with their pen and pad? Cool. Okay. So here is the first question, a little bit of a Liberty associated question. In which American city can you find the Liberty Bell? A, Washington, B, Boston, C, Philadelphia, or D, Manhattan? Write down your answers and I'll let you know when to show them.
Pretty sure this one was in National Treasure, wasn't it?
Actually, yeah, I think you're right there.
It's in How I Met Your Mother too, where they licked the Liberty Bell, but I can't remember where they went.
Which one was Washington?
Okay. Has everyone written their answer down?
Which one was Washington?
Washington was A.
A.
Okay. So show your answers in 3, 2, 1. Nobody got that right. It's actually Philadelphia, the city of brotherly love. And I've actually been and seen the Liberty Bell, so you can go and see that in Philadelphia, which actually I think is pretty much on fire right now, though. So question number 2: which classic science fiction novel begins with the line, behind every man now lives 30 ghosts, for that is the ratio by which the dead outnumber the living. A, 2001: A Space Odyssey. B, A Brave New World. C, War of the Worlds. Or D, 1984. Write down your answers. Anyone confident on this one? I'll give you a little hint that there is actually a very famous film associated with this book as well. Okay, everyone ready? Show your answers in 3, 2, 1. All wrong again. It's actually A, 2001: A Space Odyssey. Okay. This is a Captain Cook question, and I hope some of you get this one right. What is the name of the ship in which Captain James Cook made his first expedition in the Pacific Ocean? A, the Beagle. B, the Endeavour. C, the Bounty. Or D, the Endurance? Okay, everyone writing down their questions, their answers? Okay, show them in 3, 2, 1. Callum, you've got that right.
Australian history people. How can I get that one right?
It is the Endeavour. So Callum is ahead by 1 point. Okay, this is an interesting one. What was Google's original name? A, Boggle. B, One Shot. C, Typist. Or D, Backrub?
Can I get those options again?
Yeah. A, Boggle. B, One Shot. C, Typist. D, Backrub. Okay, everyone ready? 3, 2, 1, show your answers. And Connor got that right. It actually is Backrub.
We had a church trivia night the other night, and that was one of the questions. So there you go.
That is the weirdest thing. Can you imagine if they kept their name? We're just going to go Backrub something. What? Okay, and question number 5, a little bit of movie trivia for you people. What is the name of Quint's shark hunting boat in Jaws? Is it A, the whale, B, the orca, C, the dolphin, or D, the shark? Everybody ready? 3, 2, 1. Everyone got that right. I like that you've all got your movie trivia down. It is the orca. So I think that means that Connor's on 2, Callum's on 2, and George's on 1. Question number 6. How many republics made up the former Soviet Union? A, 15, B, 12, C, 20, or D, 10?
Answers again, sorry.
A, 15, B, 12, C, 20, or D, 10? I can kind of hear Theodora's voice screaming the answer in the far distance for this one. Okay, 3, 2, 1, show your answers. Connor and Georgia, you got that right. It is 15. So that means that Connor's pulled ahead to the lead, 3, and then Callum 2, and then Georgia 2. For the last question of this round, this actually isn't multiple choice. I'm going to test your Australian history again here. But in what year, and I'll give you points for the closest, in what year did women get the vote at a federal level in Australia? So not at the state level. I know South Australia did it very ahead of everyone else.
You did. So good.
I was really shocked actually when I looked up America and England after this, because they're just years and years behind us. So I'll get you to reveal your answers in
This is going to be really bad.
I'll get you to reveal your answers in 3, 2, 1.
Going to be back to front for me.
Okay, Connor, you are the closest. It's actually 1902.
Oh, cool. There you go.
So just after Federation, and comparatively, America got theirs in 1920, so 18 years later when we got the vote, and England, I'm pretty sure, is 1928, shockingly. So Australia was very, very ahead of the curve. So Connor has pulled away with a clear victory there of 4, 2 points ahead of anyone else. So I think that deserves a little clap.
I think that was sheer luck rather than knowing what the answers were.
Well, that definitely was a nail-biting trivia finish. But for now, I would like to thank every one of my guests for this amazing 19th episode of Viral Banter. Thank you, Connor, Georgia, and Callum.
Thank you.
And if you are not a member of Generation Liberty yet, what are you doing? You can join for only $10 at generationliberty.org.au, and you will get an awesome welcome pack, including books, stickers, and lots of other fun stuff, plus all the information about upcoming events, upcoming Viral Banter episodes, and everything related to youth and liberty. But for now, thank you for listening, and make sure that you stay safe, stay happy, and stay free.